and hope no one minds being recorded in this conversation. Let's go. So, Eric, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Welcome again. How do we begin? Maybe as a quick overview, if someone is not familiar with you and your work, why don't you give us a couple of minutes introduction into your professional path from a TMS pioneer building a world server to becoming a science fiction writer. That's a very interesting journey. How did you end up here? What was it like? Perhaps we can start in the beginning.
Okay. Let's see. Well, in the real beginning, like I was really lucky that when I was in second grade, my dad brought home an Atari 400 computer and we had 2 cartridges, BASIC and Logo. So I became obsessed with programming like when I was a kid. And then in 1998, when I graduated college, I was like, wanting to start a company, and I've always loved foreign languages. And I thought, oh, like almost all the web pages in the world are in English. So that's not going to be true forever. We should, people will want to translate websites, but that's probably going to be really difficult because unlike, Microsoft Word or like traditional package software, you don't release it every 2 years. The website changes all the time. So maybe the world would need some sort of like technology to help translate a website and keep the translation up to date. And that was that was the idea behind World Server. And also 1998, it was like a very easy year to raise money. People were going crazy for anything internet related. And so right after I graduated college, I was probably too lucky, raised money from investors and like started a company, had no idea what I was doing. Then other professionals came. But anyway, so then like I spent basically 10 years, the ups and downs of creating World Server, working with early customers, realizing like the original vision. I guess I could dig into this more if you're interested, but I'll just skim the surface.
That was the first company, World Server, right?
Yes, yeah, Idiom. Yeah, and like I learned a ton. And parts of the original vision I think were really good, and parts of the original vision were really bad. But anyway, if you fast forward around 10 years, at least for me personally, like Idiom became part of SDL, and I went on and I did something else. And then I spent around the next 10 years working in the field of the software for clinical trials. So one of my college classmates was Vivek Murthy, who like later became US Surgeon General. But at the time he was a doctor at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And he said to me, oh, I want to start a company, like something relating to software and scientists. And so he found me, and I was very interested in doing something other than localization at that point. So I spent, so he and I built together a company called Trial Networks. And that became part of a company called Drug Dev, which then got acquired by IQVIA. And so after then, I left there and I joined a company called Klaviyo. And then that pretty much brings us up till today. And then when the pandemic started, I started writing my novel, and then it came out in August. So.
Yes, so to go with your first step of the journey, today with us we have Natalia, Karen, and Mirko, who were the original members of the World Server group, right?
Yeah, where's oh, maybe I don't see all the screens. I didn't realize that Mirko was on too. Oh, hey, Mirko, how are you?
Hi. Yeah, good.
You have a beard now. It has been a very long time since I've seen you.
It's the COVID beard. Yeah, it's the COVID beard. Yeah. Yes, I wasn't. I didn't know that I was going to be put on the spot here by Konstantin. But yes,
you should have expected this, Mirko.
Well, I'm dressed. Let's put it that way. So.
So the rest of us look quite different, but Eric, you look exactly the same.
I'm sure that's not true, but thank you for
it's
saying
true.
that.
You look and you sound the same. That's your voice is definitely still. I mean, yeah, unchanged since. What you must have been 12, I think, when we worked on the.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, one funny thing is that when my book came out, my wife sent an email in her company, and then somebody in her company actually used to work at PTC, but I forget his name. But my wife works at Ab Initio. He's like, Eric Silberstein. Oh, he was like this. person involved in localization when I was at PTC, but the main thing he remembered is he said I look like a middle school student. So yeah, that's I guess right. So now I'm, you know, in my mid 40s, but maybe I look like I'm in my mid 30s or something. So I guess that's a gift now, but it wasn't a gift trying to like convince serious companies that they should buy this product called World Server.
Exactly.
Well, you convinced them, right? Tell us about your pizza endeavor, right? When we met before, you told me you used to run a third company in your life, and it was the pizza place.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but you know, I had a funny thing where, you know, like we were doing Idiom, and then after September 11th, you know, like all of a sudden everybody was like questioning everything, and certainly nobody was making new software purchases for some software they never heard of. And I just started thinking about the fact that I was like trying to do all this obscure stuff, like with the internet and with you know, like language, and my grandmother, who had run like a retail hat store. She and my grandfather owned a store that sold hats in New Jersey. Like she had no clue what I was doing. I was like, I really want to try something that passes the grandmother test. And I love pizza. And for whatever strange reason, I got into my head that I should own a pizza place. And so it took a while because a whole bunch of reasons, which I won't go into. But anyway, later on, my wife and I ended up buying a pizza place. And that was sort of like a side project for us. We usually work there on the weekends, and like Super Bowl night, you know, it's crazy with so many deliveries we would chip in. But yeah, from 2004 to 2008, I owned and ran a pizza place.
What kind of experience was that? Was it a painful experience? Was it a satisfying experience? In one word.
Satisfying.
Satisfying.
Let's say the first 2 years were painful and the second 2 years were satisfying.
That's good enough. Now, writing. So always unexpected that after a brilliant career in computer science, Harvard, and then you write a book. So why did you write this first novel? I mean, I loved it. I'm a big fan. That's why we have the webinar organized. How did you switch from doing business in millions to writing books, hopefully in millions of copies?
Yeah, I mean, almost just random. Like, first of all, I love reading. Like, my favorite thing to do on vacation is just read like a book a day. And science fiction, I mean, I love lots of genres. But as a kid, like I got obsessed with Isaac Asimov, and I think I read every one of his fiction books. And I even wrote my like college entrance essay on the Foundation series. But I never tried writing any fiction. I mean, really never wrote anything other than, you know, like white papers about World Server or technical documentation or that sort of thing. But the COVID, it was like all of a sudden, because I used to go to the office. Well, I'm a little bit crazy because I'm a morning person, but I used to basically like wake up at 5 a.m., get on my bike and bike into Boston and take my shower at the office and, you know, just start my day. And then like the first few weeks of COVID, I did a commute, but not to nowhere. I just like biked and turned around just to like get some exercise in. And that got boring very quickly. And I just, there was a funny thing. I was talking to my kids, and I was like, just like joking around. We were having dinner. I was like, oh, imagine 100 years from now, you know, everybody's going to live longer. So, you know, my son at the time was 13. So 113, you'll probably still be alive. Imagine how would you explain COVID and the pandemic to like your great grandchildren? Like all these crazy things that were going on, like the fact that school was just completely closed. Even now we can't understand that, because sure, you could do school over Zoom, but in the first few months, it was like, oh yeah, nobody went to school. Or the fact that, you know, we didn't trust any paper that came into the house. You know, like mail comes in through the mail slot, and you feel like you shouldn't touch it until you like give time for the germs to die, or you have to like wipe your groceries. Anyway, I was like, how would you explain that to your great grandchildren? And then I started thinking, well, you know, what else wouldn't they imagine? Like maybe we won't be eating any meat that comes from animals, or maybe we won't even need to cook because we'll just 3D print our food. Anyway, I was just going crazy joking around with them. But then the next morning, instead of biking, I started writing that down as a short story. And it, not like I had any experience writing short stories, but I don't know. I felt like writing was like writing fiction was a little bit like writing software. You know, you're creating something from nothing, and it became addictive. Like the more I wrote, the more I got into my characters. And something I had heard and never believed is like, I always heard authors would be like, people would say to an author like, oh, you've written 7 really successful books in this series. Why are you writing the 8th one? And the author would say something like, oh, I just needed to know what the character would do. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Of course, you know, it's out of your brain, but you really don't know until you start writing it. And I just got obsessed with this. And I had and like the more I wrote, the more fun it was. And then I started sending drafts to people, and some people hated it, but some people liked it. And the people who liked it, that was like motivating. So yeah, it was really totally random. It wasn't like a lifelong thing. I was
so
like,
it's not something you planned for many years. It's you sat on your desk. First you wrote yourself, then you had GPT-3 write for you, and it all kicked off, right?
Yes, except for I only tried GPT-3 after I was all done.
That's what they all say, right?
Yes,
in the future, how would we know if the novel is really written by the writer, or is it written by an AI and a team of post editors for this AI, ghost writers with GPT-3?
Yeah, I don't know. We're used in my current company that I work for called Klaviyo. We just rolled out a feature using GPT-3 to generate subject lines, like for email marketing, and it's indistinguishable. It's often more clever than the human copywriters, and sometimes it's even humorous. And so now it's different between writing a subject line and writing a novel, but still, it blows my mind what could be going on inside GPT-3 to be doing what it does. So
we must go for borrow as soon as possible. So in the book, you have many technical concepts, which I loved. And the first thing which captured me and which kept me in the narrative were the technical ideas, right? You have printed clothing on which you project the outfits. You have printed falafel. You have people walking around the beach and doing the therapy sessions on the fly with 5% of the brain in reality and 95% in metaverse. By the way, did you feel like Mark Zuckerberg stole your idea, or?
Yes, I 100% felt 100%. Like that.
Right. Now, one of the most prominent ideas in the book is borrow, of course, right? The board of reality overseers, or people and algorithms that battle fake news. And the young people are all over battling fake news. Somehow they were set on this crusade. And last year I went on a Swiss NLP conference, Swiss Text. We had this exercise where people had to split into teams and come up with an idea in, I don't know, 20 minutes, something like this. And guess what? The fake news fighting was the idea which came from 3 teams independently out of maybe 7, something like that. So borrow is here in terms of people wanting it, but it's not here in terms of any practical thing. If you do you see a real need for borrow? And do you see that there should be some body, and what kind of body, that governs fake news fighting on an international level? How would you bring it about? Where does the inspiration come from, maybe? So borrow, subject number 1.
Yes, yeah, that is hard. I mean, let me say, like, I'm sure everybody here, it's the same that, well, maybe some people know, but I'm sure most people, there's something just really disturbing to your core about like fake news, conspiracy theories. I mean, especially over the, last few years, it's just so upsetting that people seem to believe things that there should be no basis for believing, or that people are so easily fooled or so easily sucked into craziness, and it becomes sort of self-reinforcing and echo chambers, and of course helped along by the endless algorithms and personalization of social media. So that's okay, no question that that's super disturbing. I wanted in my book to paint a future in which we had moved beyond that, where somehow, like, it was solved. But who knows if it can be solved? And so like one way I thought of is, well, what if like, I guess the history of our world is using technology to solve the problems that we created earlier. So, okay, like in theory, we should be able to get good enough that let me give you a simple example, which is like in email, right? Like we all remember when there used to be so much spam. And we also know that if you use Gmail today, it's pretty good at getting rid of the spam for you. Sure, everybody, maybe spam is in the eye of the beholder, but the stuff that's like definitely fraudulent or trying to phishing or that sort of stuff, it gets rid of it. And one of the types of like things that's going on is there's this sort of feedback mechanism where, if I send an email to 100,000 people and very few of those people look at it, well, that probably means that it's spam. And so then Gmail will start to be much more suspicious of that sender of email or even that particular email. And so you could imagine like
that
algorithms.
Happened to be as a marketeer a few times.
Yes. Well, I think there's really good marketing, and then there's also sort of evil marketing, and I think that like the inbox providers do a pretty good job of distinguishing between that. If there's a brand that you love and they email you in a respectful way, you'd probably be upset if that didn't show up, in your inbox. And so you can imagine similar stuff happening with like news as well, right? Like there can be processes to like push back and contain stuff that is invalid or just conspiracy theories or whatnot. But anyway, let's assume that technology could be invented or maybe has even been invented. But then who's going to get to decide that? Like, history is in the eye of the beholder. And so it seems like there would have to exist some body like this. But do I really think such a body will exist and that the whole world will come together and there'll be this harmony and everybody will agree worldwide, except maybe China, to have a board of reality overseers? Probably not. Or at least it doesn't seem especially more likely than many other scenarios. But it became I guess a mechanism I wanted in the story to make the whole story come. It was almost necessary.
So it's your concern, but it's not a real life inspiration. It's something that you processed and you came up with, and it's your gift to the reader, right? The idea of Borrow. But not an inspiration grounded in current fact or trend.
I don't believe that there is a current organization that's doing that.
Maybe we should come up with something. I'll ask my other question. It's going to be a very Russian question, since I come from Russia, and then I invite some questions from the audience. I still have many questions on my list, so if no one can come up, I'll back up the audience, but I really strongly encourage the question after to come from our group, and you can raise your hand or send an emoji if you want to say something in organized fashion. Now, my question is following up on Borrow, and it's about culture. Culture is a big thing in Apple, right? You have all this futuristic stuff, but you also have a huge focus on culture. You have the tech firm culture, the lab culture with scientists researching. Then you have the ministry culture with government people being wheelers, dealers, or very open. Then you have the culture of the dance studio, which without giving too many spoilers away, because guess guys in the chat, did you read the book already? Do you want spoilers or no spoilers? Anyway, I'll proceed with no spoilers unless someone writes in the chat spoilers are okay, and then we can discuss it in a more open way. Now, that dance studio even has a head of culture as one of the characters, which I really love. I think it's a big thing, right? It goes on so many levels: how people are recruited, how people are indoctrinated, how people become the champions of the cause they have been recruited to. And it's very important. In today's world, you can don on any mask. You can play a video game, be a terrorist. You can imagine yourself rich and powerful in a virtual world. It's piece of cake. In a video game, people don on masks very rapidly, and they change this perception. You can easily through the power of the internet see your life in any other scenario. You can see how you would live in another country, how you would live in another job, maybe even on Mars. You can imagine how you would live on another planet. So this leads to younger generation feeling disconnected, right? Different geographies, different identities. They lose a strong ethnic identity or national identity or belonging to a particular group, and they search for this culture to be their kind of part of their ego, right? Part of what makes them themselves. And so I think it's a big message in your book, and you're looking at this from different perspectives. Is there a hidden message? Is there a moral? Is there something particularly that you wanted to communicate by putting so much into culture? Or maybe it's based on your personal experience and you were maybe putting on paper what you went through in life. So where does it come from and where does it lead? Culture.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And right, it's funny because everything you describe is exactly like what I was thinking about, except I don't think I ever put it together exactly the way you just described it. So I'm seeing some new connections you've described some new connections I hadn't thought of. I guess culture. So one thing that so one thing that is interesting is what about culture causes people to follow leaders, even bad leaders? There was this one thing that happened in the US. I don't know if you remember it. I guess it was, I don't remember, sometime after Trump became president, and they went around the table of the cabinet, and all these, very senior accomplished people had to basically say something. I forget what exactly, but, show their fealty. And like something I've struggled with for not just there, but even like in the various companies I've been a part of. I always wonder, like, what is it about like our nature that causes us to follow leaders in certain ways? And so that's like something that I was struggling with. And then I have this other thing, which I think is sort of a flaw and a strength in my own personality, which is I often feel like I'm an outsider, and I don't have a very easy time just like going with the flow or things along those lines. And so, right, I guess I was working through like, what does it mean to be part of a culture? How can cultures be really positive, but also how can cultures really cause people to lose sight of reality? And of course, that's going right back to the fake news, because what you said is what we're seeing is people become part of these microcultures. And some of those cultures are, so distorted, but because it's a group of people, they're able to, reinforce each other. And it's a very, I think scary part about how just humans, how we are as social creatures. So, but yeah, and then there's, culture, like another meaning of culture is just like, hey, what is Russian culture like? And what is academic culture like? And here and languages. And so I tried to hopefully convey some of that passion for culture in the book as well.
Yes, drinking on islands and singing bard music, that was spot on. I wonder who suggested this, because I could look at this and I could totally see every one of those people. It's so very Russian. Anyway, this is the time for the question from the audience. Do we have a question? Ladies and gentlemen, please step up and take the spot if you'd like to ask something.
I'd like to ask. I will have to.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Boris Zverev. And I just read your book, I think over Christmas time or New Year's or something like that. That was very good, first of all. And a couple observations and a couple questions. I'm just jumping because I'll have to disconnect at 11. But first thing is that it was striking to me that your time frame of the book is 2100 and way beyond, and yet there's no even mention of climate change or impact or anything like that. So I'm curious, did you sort of assume that that will be solved by AI somehow, or just left it out of framework of the novel for other reasons? Another thing is that you kind of narrowed, I mean, the novel takes place over the global kind of planetary, more or less, structure, and yet you left a big chunk of the world completely outside of the book. Like what happens to the rest of the Europe, to like Africa and Latin America? There's no mention of them in the New World at all whatsoever. And then, so those are kind of my observations. And then my question is, how much of yourself is in Sergei Krayev? Of course, an interesting question. I have a feeling just by sort of hearing your comment, that's probably a good chunk of your character is in Sergei Krayev. And I think that's enough.
Yeah, let's go one by one.
Okay. Yeah, good questions. You're absolutely not the first person to say to me, well, two things that people have said to me over and over. Why is climate change not in there, and why is crypto not in there? And these are both issues that people are very passionate about, and they, and of course they're going to be, well, climate change for sure, and probably crypto will be factors in 80 years from now. I assume I didn't want to make the book one way or the other specifically about climate change, so I basically just assumed that we've somehow solved that, and we were sort of okay. Maybe not on the best path, but not in a totally screwed up place by the turn of the next century. And I guess I have a similar answer, not a similar answer, but for the rest of the world, I was already struggling and probably many people do feel like I was trying to do, it got to be too diffuse to have like stuff in Korea and stuff in Israel and stuff in the United States and stuff in Russia and stuff in Singapore. And I guess I didn't, I think I had some clues about what might have been going on in China, but you're right, I didn't say anything about the rest of the world. And I think it was just beyond the scope of what I could, it's a fiction, and it was just beyond the scope of what I was trying to do.
Just destroyed the United States and then torn it apart by civil war, but otherwise it's all fine.
Exactly. Your third question is there something of Sergei Krayev in me? Yes. I am certainly like nowhere near the math genius that he is, and I'm probably not as insecure as he is, but the insecurity that I projected into him certainly comes from personal experience. Now, interestingly, when I was so lucky, when I was in sophomore year of high school, I got to go on this exchange program, and I became friends with this guy in Moscow, whose last name is Krayev. His first name is not Sergei, who was a math genius. And so that may be a little bit of inspiration for the character as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Boris. Do we have a new question from the audience? Let's see if someone else wants to take the spotlight. Let's give it a 3-second pause.
Eric, it's Karen. So you mentioned the locales in which the story was placed. Can you say something about why you chose those particular ones? I mean, Silicon Valley might be a little obvious, but the others?
Why KISS, right? The abbreviation KISS countries.
The KISS, yes, Korea, Israel, Singapore, and Sweden. All really slightly different reasons for each, but all personal experience. So Singapore, I spent the summer in Singapore, really loved my time there. I spent a lot of time hiking and walking and seeing the country. And, it's also a very interesting place because it's almost like Disney World. It's so strict and so organized, and I don't know, it left a big impression on me. So that was why Singapore. Korea, because, you know, I feel like we're already starting to see how Korean culture is, you know, playing a little bit of the role that a US culture used to play or still plays. Like, you know, it's pretty crazy. People all over the world are listening to K-pop and watching Korean drama, and look at the success of, what's the name of the show that just came out?
No, not Octopus Game. What was it?
Squid Game. Yeah.
The Squid Game.
Yeah. And so, and also I grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey, which was a town where a lot of Korean Americans lived. I had, and many of my friends growing up, you know, were Korean Americans. And so, right, that's sort of why Korea. And Israel, because I've traveled there a bunch of times and I really like it. And so those three, the US, of course, because I'm here in the US, and Russia because of the time that I spent there. Sweden, it was really just to make the KISS acronym work, and because I don't know the city Gothenburg or Gothenburg, I think it's pronounced in Swedish. It's a city I've gone to many times because one of the customers I worked with in my prior company was AstraZeneca, so I really like it. But no actual action takes place there. But there is one character who comes from Sweden. So,
thank you.
Yes, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, you did.
Next question, ladies, gentlemen, if there is a question from you, or maybe I can ask a question while you're preparing. Natalia, did you want to ask first?
Sure, I can ask.
Go ahead. Ladies first.
I have to confess, I haven't finished reading. I've been inundated with projects, so I'm like somewhere in a third or 2/3. About a halfway through, and but I have a feeling I know where it's all going. And just, you know, AI has been such a easy thing for us to adopt, thinking that, oh, it's good. And you know, you're showing a completely different story, how it can be bad for you. So is the only way for us to sort of survive as a mankind is to unplug? Because your sort of example shows that actually, you know, it can be really bad when you unplug, right? But to me, it feels like, even though I love the convenience of the AI, and I don't really see a way for us to not use AI, but how do we basically put these two together? I don't know if I'm making sense, but what's the path forward? I think that's to me, that's the main question of your book, but I still don't know how to answer it.
Yeah.
Natalia is in for a surprise, right, Eric? She when she finishes reading.
I don't know. It depends on how good you are at predicting the ending from what you read so far. Some people have told me, oh, it's obvious from the beginning, and some people are really surprised. And, you know, I spent a lot of time trying to tweak what I did and didn't include in the first chapter to strike the balance between foreshadowing, but also not giving it all away. But anyway, I mean, you're asking such a fundamental, important question. I guess I don't think we'll ever get unplugged. Like, I don't see how we could ever go backwards, you know, unless we have some sort of catastrophe that, I don't know, we go back to the dark ages or something, and we don't even know how to manufacture chips anymore. So, but I guess what I'm at least trying to get across is this caution of if things become too centralized, you know, no matter how perfect we think we are, no matter how good we get at writing flawless software, like humans and software will always be flawed. So there's some cautionary stuff in there, but I'm not believing it would be possible or correct to like unplug, like to even, you know, forget about brain implants. I mean, nobody can even unplug today. You cut yourself off immediately from everything. So
I know.
Too late.
Great. And sorry, just one more quick question. As a person who loves to sing Bard songs and who grew up with that, where did that come from?
In 1994, I spent the summer in Nizhny Novgorod, And I stayed with the family, and the mother in the family was a brain surgeon. The father was not home because he was in the Navy or something. And I'd never heard of Bard or anything like that. And there was the TV was on and Yuri Vizber was singing and the mother was watching and she was explaining to me who this is and the history. And I don't know, maybe because I do like folk music and I just, I just loved, I just, not like I even really understand the lyrics, but I just like loved his voice. I love the sort of slightly out of tune guitar. And then I sort of forgot about it until Spotify because, I didn't have, and then, Spotify, you can listen to anything, anytime. And so I found, this album of Yuri Vizber and I just remembered how much that I loved it. And then I sort of worked it back into the story.
Excellent. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Milaya Maya and, a lot of his others, I really... Yes, I just love
that. That's definitely in the right age group, right? My kids probably will never hear that or understand the significance, but for me and Natalia, this is
Konstantin.
Right. I mean, obviously, I'm claiming that these parents, but these parents are parents who are born, whatever 70, 80 years from now. Are into it, so I guess I'm assuming that his music is going to have at least several centuries worth of fans. Maybe it's some sort of he'll be rediscovered many times or something.
Right. Let's ask you about the language industry. We're all here from language localization, translation, interpreting, you name it. You've been a pioneer for us, right? You created the first big commercial TMS. I don't know if you have any regrets that you cashed out early. And I know that the market today is crazy. You got some money for Idiom, and TMS are going at 20 times sales to investors these days. So it's a different market. It's more mature and much more money. How do you see, do you follow a little bit of what's going on in the language industry? Are you connected with us in some way? And maybe if you are, what is your perspective on what language and localization is going through right now, and where will we be by 2100?
Yeah.
That's an unexpected question, right? You knew it was coming. We just couldn't avoid it.
Yeah, but you told me that at 8:30 and I'm in the middle of writing people's reviews and I had to work on a review from that. Anyway, I told you I wouldn't be able, that's such a hard question. And I know,
but tell us what you think. Give us a slice of your mind.
I mean,
do you have regrets?
I have lots of regrets about everything, I guess, but not really regrets that we sold or something like that. I have regrets about how we built the company. I think if we had built it in a different way, we could have set ourselves up for, basically we raised too much money too early. And when you raise so much money, you try to make something happen maybe before it's meant to happen. And I think World Server was, the need was, let's put it this way, at the time that we were bringing World Server to the world, and some of you were like pioneers in your companies and interested in bringing it in, but the vast majority of people in the world, they weren't feeling that much pain because they were doing localization at a small scale or they were doing no localization at all. And they were perfectly happy to hire a language service provider and exchange some documents and get things translated. And it was I just don't think back in like 1999 and 2000, I just don't think the market was big enough or the need was great enough. And so maybe if we had built the company differently, we could have sort of slowly, not spent so much venture money and tried to make such a big splash. We could have sort of slowly grown the business over time and be in a different position. I don't, would have, could have, should have, who knows? On the other hand, maybe because we had a lot of venture money, we were able to capture people's imagination. So I don't know. But I'm not really following too much. Like I hear updates from people from time to time who I chat with, but I'm not like, I really don't have a great sense for the latest and greatest. I mean, I'm amazed by machine translation, but I don't really know in detail, like what's going on. Like, has everything become MT first and then post edit, or is that still relatively?
No, we're very traditional.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sorry. I don't.
Who knows? It will get there one day. But one thing that maybe I want to know, my mentor, Renato Beninato, tells us about the jello effect, right? It's really, really difficult to escape the localization industry for the reason that it has so many nice people. Right, you come in and it's super comfortable, from the top managers down to people doing the work, the expert linguists. Everyone's highly educated, nice, capable, not too pushy, like maybe in software or in clinical trials. And so once you come, it sucks you in and you never leave. It's like forever. The language industry is forever, but you escaped. Any feelings about that? Are you happy that you escaped, or would you come back if you had an opportunity?
I sort of think it's a flaw in my personality that I'm like, I feel the most successful people in life are the people who pick one thing and stick with it over their entire career. And, whatever reason, maybe I'm not cut out to do that because, I made this switch then to clinical trials and then made the switch again. And now there was also like a non-compete that maybe forced me to do something else for at least a period of time, but I don't know. So I love language and languages and learning foreign languages and even everything about translation and what does it even really mean to move something from one language to another. But I guess I didn't love the fact that at least at the time it really felt like pulling teeth to get people to be interested in World Server. Like for all of the visionaries that, and I'm like, I happen to be looking at Karen the way the Zoom is, like for every visionary like Karen, there was 100 other people who didn't give us the time of day. Now, maybe the answer should be, yeah, tough, that's entrepreneurship. You should have just dealt with that and kept a smiling face and just been more and more persistent. But I wasn't, I guess. So. And it also wasn't totally my decision anyway, because a lot of the way venture worked back then, it was like, oh, you find some kid in college, you start something, but then you bring in other professionals around them. And I think now much more, a lot of times the person who starts it also gets to, if they want to, play the role of CEO. The thoughts have changed about what somebody fresh out of college can do.
It really depends, but yeah, I see. Well, thank you very much for being honest with us. This is genuine and this is very authentic coming from you. I didn't expect such spot-on answers. Other people put on the spot like I did to you in this interview, they would give more evasive answers, and you addressed it head on. It's very, very impressive. Any other questions from the room? If not, I have two closing up questions for Eric. But before I do, let's check that maybe someone wants to answer to ask a question, and
actually,
there is something interesting.
Yeah, I actually would like to. First of all, I read your your follow-up email to your book about the GDP3 versions of your first paragraph, right? I personally like version C, if I recall correctly. I thought that was a bit more eloquent, actually, linguistically, and a little bit more elaborate. So I would choose that as a first introduction. But I'm curious if you have any actually plans to run your whole novel through GDP3 and see how that comes out and make it, maybe compare it like that. But I also wanted to ask, obviously the big event in the novel is, USA falling apart, which actually triggered the formation of Boro, right? So, and it's very, I guess, right now, easy to basically just extrapolate current situation, and it seems like we actually not too far that, reality, future, as scary as it might be. Can you speak a little bit about, you just take current situation, extrapolate it, and then you came up with that thing? Thank you.
Yeah. You mean like, why did I think that might happen?
I mean, do you think it's like inevitability, or is that just one of your worst case scenarios kind of thing?
That's a very Russian question.
Yeah, I think it's a worst case scenario. I don't think anybody who said it's inevitable, I mean, they way too confident. Like, how could you know it's inevitable? But whatever. I'm mid-40s, so I only know, I've only lived through what I've lived through. I can't compare it to other periods in American history or other countries' history. But for me, anyway, maybe all these things were going on, the hatred and divisiveness and everything, and it was just like hidden. But it's still, the last few years have been like just totally, like, I feel like complete loss of innocence. Like I was totally naive about, like, I thought we were in a world where people more or less were on the same page and shared a common sense of facts. And the hatred seems so intense, and just the tribalism and the lack of faith in good intentions of people in the other party. And so and then even if you look at the changes in US politics since when I wrote this, now maybe it's not exactly the scenario I outlined, but some of these changes in like redistricting and whatnot that will, so I don't know, but it doesn't, it's not like we have a guarantee that the US is always going to be this like perfectly functioning. I'm sure all of you from Russia are laughing at me, but okay. It's not like we have a guarantee that the US is going to be always like this great functioning country. But on the other hand, there's like been all this resilience. So I don't think anybody knows, but definitely it's something that like deeply disturbs me, and I'm sure lots of other people. And I was trying to use this writing as a way to like deal with that, this thing that's bothering me at the core.
Let's have a next question, which would be more optimistic. We're getting very much in the Russian tristesse, and I want to finish on a more positive note. So I guess Juan and Karen had questions, right?
I have one. I want to know if you're going to write any more books.
Yes, that was obviously, is there a second one, right? Thank you, Karen. It's a spot on question.
Yeah, I love doing this, and I definitely want to do it again. Like, whether I'll be able to do it successfully and feel good enough about it that I want to share it with the world, I don't know. I am working on one right now. Actually, my main character is a translator, but it's less science fiction-y. So I think even if I'm successful in finishing it, I might do it not under my own name, because I want to let my name for science fiction. But yes, this was, in some ways, you create a piece of software and people use it. It's like very exciting. This was like the exact same excitement. It's like even now, I can't tell you how much I love the fact that like Konstantin is talking about these like things that I just made up in my head. If every day could be like this, I would love it. So yes, I hope I can write something else that I feel good enough about, that I want to like, publish it so other people could read it. We
look forward to the next creation, and if it's about translators, we'll see you back in this room. I imagine with bigger audience of people. Juan, and what about you? What is your question?
Yeah, I also have a light question. This just arrived, so I haven't had the time, but to do deeper questions. But do you have any authors or books that actually serve as kind of inspiration for this book? Because I'm sure you have kind of read a lot of science fiction before and such. So.
Yes, and actually, when you get to the last page, it encourages you to go sign up for my mailing list. But you can go sign up even if you didn't get to the last page yet. And it will send you a list of around 20 books that I read. I read probably 50 books while I was writing this, but there were 20 that I really enjoyed, like mix of fiction and nonfiction. Like I think I have a lot of information about software. I didn't need to read anything about that, but like less so dance. So I read a lot of books, and the ones that I really enjoyed it'll send you an email with each one and like maybe a paragraph or two about what I liked about the book. So definitely do that. And then in terms of science fiction authors, you know, as a kid, I loved Asimov. Neil Stephenson is another author that I love, but you know, there's hard pressed like to read a science fiction book and not enjoy it. So
great. It's going to be a great gift to get that email then. So
thank you very much. And last question for today. It's going to be a tricky one. Eric, you've given us a gift of this wonderful book and your presence here and genuine and authentic answers to many complex and difficult questions. So I applaud you on sharing with us so much. Can you share with us the last big thing? And the question is, how should we apply ourselves as a body of people? And some of us are powerful, right? Some of us are young and energetic. Some of us are influencers. Some of us are looking for a way to make the world better. So how can we, at this point of time, when AI is blossoming and language is important, how can we create a better version, a better vision of the future? Is there something we could do to, I don't know, maybe help create Borrow, because it has to do with the language, or maybe there's another idea that you have or vision that you have in store for us. What can we do to make the world better? I see. It's a tricky question, and left it for the last, and I didn't give you a warning. So
yeah.
I put you on the spot.
Right. I mean, I don't think on the spot I can make some great answer, but one thing I do feel is if more people had more global exposure, the world would be a better place. Like I do think the fact that I made an effort to learn other languages, travel to a lot of other countries, which I bet is 100% true for everybody on this call, it makes me see things that some of these other people who are following conspiracy theories probably are not seeing. They have too like narrow a view. And so it feels like anything that you can do, that we can do, that helps people better understand the richness of the world and different perspectives, would be helpful. And of course, as soon as you do that, you need to start running into language boundaries. And so, you know, I don't know. I don't have anything more than
that. It's homework for you, right? We'll be eagerly waiting for a blog post from you on your website about applying ourselves, right, as a body of people, as a concerted effort. How can we make the world better? Borrow is a great idea. Perhaps more to follow, and we can start a dialogue on your website. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and interesting discussion. I hope everyone on this call have enjoyed staying with us through this hour. And those of you who have received the book just today, I know that Juan received today and Anita just received it today, 15 minutes before the call. So enjoy reading the book, follow up on this conversation, and we'll see you again on another show. It's been Eric Silberstein and Konstantin Dranch and all of you. Thank you and have a good day and a good evening.
Thank you, Konstantin, for organizing.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Bye-bye, Eric. Bye. Thank you.
Salut, Eric.
Bye-bye.